First question. Glasses up. Okay. Both of your works bring historical black figures and forgotten histories into the present. Jodie through monologue of 18th, 19th century women like Sarah Williams and Mary Williamson, and Asia through honoring enslaved Africans brought to New York ports. How does performance allow you to access or express truth that historical records and texts alone might leave behind?
Great question. Thank you, Michael. Well, being that the archives that I've encountered with this project in particular, and being that it takes place, these events take place in the 1800s, there was no video, there was no other documentation or evidence of this beyond writing, really. Writing and maybe some artifacts. The letter was an artifact, actually. So how do I bring this to life? It takes the act of performing it to bring in some human emotion and feeling.
Thank you for the question. I think I can give maybe some context to the piece that I just shared, or the excerpt that I just shared too, and approaching the question. So the piece I presented is a work called After Air. It's a site-specific performance that was made in response to Pier 11, South Street Seaport in Manhattan, which is historically the port where, according to the Slave Voyages database, over 11,000 enslaved Africans disembarked in that area and were trafficked and sold nearby at the intersection of Wall Street and Pearl Street. And Wall Street alone was also built by enslaved Africans. And there's no public monument or even acknowledgement of this history. And when you think about the wider landscape of the financial district, and also the way that the seaport's changed in the last decade or last 2 decades, so much of the capital that is in exchange there dates back to enslavement. And so for me, this performance is a way of activating that space, of recalling those histories, and particularly of bringing in sonic elements. So how can sound, how can movement recall these stories, recall these voices that have been disregarded and ignored by public records?
Thank you. Okay, next question. Yeah. Next question. From fishing nets, copper pipes, and wind chimes to the physical presence of plants and sugar, material culture plays a central role in your work, both of yours work. How do these physical objects act as conduits for spirituality, memory, and political storytelling?
Okay, yeah, I'm very much a material girl. Let's see. I love fabric, textiles. With this piece in particular, Living Histories of Sugar, which is my version is the Living Histories of Sugar. I want to talk about the Living Histories of Sugar project that started in 2019. It was a collaboration between myself and some scholars from University of Edinburgh and some actors and performance artists from Trinidad and Tobago and Scotland. So it was like a transnational endeavor. And during COVID, which delayed our project, we had the time to really do more research, and it allowed me to really experiment with materials. Being that this was like a play that was traveling between countries, I had to think about what are the obstacles. I can't carry a big suitcase of all the props, and I had to even make like weapons out of cardboard because obviously you can't take a machete across the ocean. So I got into like the embroidered piece back there. I figured, like, why not? I'm having like this kind of dialogue with these women that are obviously no longer living, and I'm like thinking, how can I help portray their experience best? And so I was like thinking of ghosts, and I think that the white material in particular just lends itself to that, being that it was also like fabric, and I was like thinking about doing, for the 2023 version I did at Wave Hill, how can I transport this work and somewhat alter it into the space at Wave Hill, which is very much like a garden. And so I brought in the washboard scene, and then I brought in like the tub, and so the piece has kind of evolved a bit since 2022, I'm sorry, when I first performed it in Jamaica and Scotland. And I don't know. I'm thinking also about like, well, the pen and the letters and the tea stuff, ceramics. Yeah, I feel like these materials are that just definitely help to support the story. I don't know, and cotton too, particular with the white cloth and washing and labor. Thinking very much about labor and how can these objects help me to portray what this labor could be like, by physically washing the clothes, pouring the tea, and all that.
I think material is also incredibly important for me in translating archival records and data into something that could be more sensorial and more evocative within the performance. And so many enslaved Africans, particularly those who disembarked in what we now call New York, were actually exchanged for copper pipes or guinea pipes in West Africa. And so copper became this central element and an object that I really wanted to bring into the performance, and particularly thinking of the sound of copper, of finding a way to make copper wind chimes, and then to make a garment that could function as a copper wind chime. So both through my physical movements and the movement of others, the movement of the wind. The garment that I'm wearing itself is actually made of commercially used nylon fishing nets. So these were used by fishermen, and I wanted to also bring in, elements from the ocean, from the water, particularly when I initially performed this next to the water, bringing in, transforming myself into this being that's been dredged up from the water, from the ocean. Thinking about Middle Passage too.
Thank you for that. This leads into my next question, and question this is for you, Asia. Your piece was originally created for South Street Seaport. Directly engaging with the body of water where enslaved people arrived, translating this performance away from the water into Joyce Kilmer Park, changes its acoustic and physical landscape. How does shifting into an urban park in the Bronx transform the piece's political potential meaning?
One of the biggest changes I made in transferring this from the seaport up to the Bronx was the original performance was participatory, and it felt very urgent and necessary to get the audience and passersby, particularly white folks who were present in the space, to get them to almost require them to be part of the work. And in that piece, I would basically wordlessly, approach people in the audience, gesture towards them, get them to follow me to the edge of the pier, and I would actually have them tie the copper pipes to the railing, or I would tie it myself for them, and then I would give each person a command. So tap, bang, strike, scratch, and they were each given a little sort of pebble or rock to then turn the copper pipe into an instrument. So that participatory element felt very important there. I think coming into Joyce Kilmer Park, I was here earlier today setting up and hanging up the pipes, and it just felt nice to have the installation exist on its own for several hours without my presence here, to see how people would interact with it, to see the sounds that were produced as the wind sort of made its way through the park throughout the afternoon and throughout the evening. And I think here I wanted less of not that the original performance was combative, but just this is this sort of I'm this emergence passing through the park, and the work or the labor is on for this iteration of it.
Participatory stuff going on. Right there. There you go. So it's working. So you had the ice cream folk, and you got the kids with the pipes, and okay. All right. Next question. Joyce Kilmer Park offers a rich green canopy right across from the Bronx County building and bustling urban life. How does bringing work rooted in Caribbean history, sugar production, land reclamation, and historical trauma into the Bronx Public Park foster new connections with the surrounding community?
No, it's not. How does this bring
How does this
foster? Okay, community.
It's also interesting to me, like it's always like when I think about like live performances in parks and stuff, and then like for me it's like, will people show up? What if stuff doesn't go the right way? There was a kid with a bike. I want like it was like it's like you just start thinking like, do they see me? Is it like it gets frustrating, but then it's also like, how do you work through that? Because it's like you were in a whole like in another like place. Like I was like, what's happening? And then y'all just kept going, right? And I guess that this is probably why I don't do performance art. I would probably want to fight everybody and be like, shut up, this thing, you don't hear what's going on. Like everybody be quiet, so like yeah. So yeah.
Sorry, I was a little distracted because I just saw a kid like run on my tablecloth piece over there. Okay. Yeah, but I think it's a really wonderful thing that we're bringing art out in the open and having people from all walks of life interact with it in some way, and that it's free and educational. And I wish there was more of this happening. That's all I can say for now. I mean, obviously, we're at the risk of whatever happens, so we're very vulnerable as we do this. But yeah, it just comes with the territory.
Yeah, I would say that I love performing in public spaces. As I've performed in galleries, performed in museums, performed in theaters, and those provide a certain level of resources, technical support. You have so much control over what happens, and I think there's something really beautiful when you surrender. And performances are always, regardless of how participatory they are or not, they're always collaborative. You're always collaborating within the environment in which you have the privilege of entering and of being, of the people who witness your work, the audience, those who are in the surrounding area, and just, it's this moment of being with that I really love. And I love how there are always things that are unexpected that happen, unpredictable that happen, and I think that that's like the heart of what performance can be outdoors.
Kind of wanted to go back with the material question because I brought in the candies that I shared with everyone earlier. They're candies that are literally from Scotland, and the project actually was talking about Scotland's relationship to plantation slavery. And so in that 2022 performance, I brought in it was my idea, of course, to bring in candies from the back of the audience, from the back of the stage, and from the back of the theater, and then serve everyone in the audience candy. So it's very tied to the particular subject matter I'm dealing with, and I want everyone to taste the candy, but also think about the history of that. Anyway, so people are just, helping themselves to the basket over there, which is it's all the way back there by the tree. But anyway.
Are you gonna leave those pipes here, or are you gonna collect them? You're gonna have to fight the kids, get them back. No. So my other question is, how do you stay focused, or like, do you go into some sort of a trance or something when you're performing? Because you seem like you were here when you were hitting the pipes, and I was just like, yeah, how do you get to that place, and how do you prepare for something like this? Both of you, how do you prepare for like this? Because you're dealing with trauma and a whole bunch of other heavy stuff, so it's like, how do you prepare yourself for it? And then do you have to like decompress and like chill for a bit after you do stuff like this?
Yeah, so to prepare, when I'm preparing to perform, The ritual changes every time, but something I've been doing for the last few years is I'll always have a book with me. So this afternoon I had a book that's by the scholar Robert Reed Farr on it's on many things. On one of the topics he's writing about is the transatlantic slave trade, and I just do this thing before I go out where like I open up a random page and go to a random line, and then whatever that, whatever those words are words that I can return to when I'm performing to ground myself. So today's words were the dark ship's loom, and so it's just this sort of repetition of those words helps me, return to the purpose of the performance. And then because something like this, this was entirely improvised, but there was also a general score. So I knew that, I would arrive into the park, I'd walk from the museum to the park to this tree, and I actually didn't know first if I was going to do more movements and activate these pipes that I'm wearing, or start with the pipes that were hanging on the tree, and I just felt called to do that first. And the action or intention was to knock all of the pipes off the tree, which is sort of the first series of tasks that I set for myself. And then, I was ready to be moved to anything else after that was accomplished. And I think because it's so repetitive and it's so, the gesture is so small, even though it was physically exhausting to swing a really heavy rock over and over above myself. But it's because you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again, I think you do start to enter a trance. And there's nothing else. Like I was aware of the audience being here. I was aware of people being, on all sides of me, but it was my only focus was those pipes. And that's how, helps draw me in, I think.
Wonderful to hear about that. I don't really have anything, a ritual that I go into before I perform. I just do it. I don't know. I just like review the lines over and over again. And even though I do that, sometimes I mess up. But it was when I collaborate too. It's like a different energy. So I have to just make sure I'm on. We're on the same page, like with Fitzmore, he was doing his little ritual of singing some Michael Jackson song up there, backstage at the museum up there in the reading room. But I just was like steaming the clothes, and that was meditative enough to just kind of think like I'm singing while I'm steaming the clothes,
In terms of the costumes, I know that you want to talk about you collaborated with somebody that had this made. And where'd you get that rock from? What is that? Do you keep that rock? Is that the same rock you use all the time? Okay.
So I have a wonderful collaborator. Her name is Sarah Wondrak. She's not here right now, but she's a fantastic fashion designer, and we've had the privilege of working together over the last few years on different projects. So I approached her back in, I think it was April or so, and I sent over a few sort of designs and inspiration for what I wanted this to look like, had sourced the materials, and then she's a bit of a wizard, and so within a matter of weeks whipped this together. And we spent a lot of time thinking too about how we wanted to dye the dress, because the commercial net was originally this sort of very dull shade of gray, and we wanted it to reflect the colors that you would see in the water, particularly on a sunny day. And so going into this more azure color. There are lots of greens in here. And it felt important as well for there to be this hood or veil, and also of something that it does feel a bit otherworldly. It's strange and unexpected. And it was nice to have that in the performance.
Jodie, you make a lot of your costumes, right? And where do you get the inspiration for that from? And talk about like a lot of the other stuff that you make for your performances. Like, you make hats and White Houses and stuff like that.
Yeah, this performance, it's like a period piece. So I love sewing. I wanted to be a fashion designer, so I sewed this garment myself. This corset I sewed and the skirt I but the undergarment was actually, I'm wearing a slip from my grandmother. Was her original slip, and then this I found just materials for the arts, you know. But yeah, I love clothing. In fact, I'm kind of like a clothing collector, and yeah, in terms of like object making, like I when I was even preparing for this piece, I wrote the letter, Mary's letter, over and over and over again. So that kind of worked its way into helping me prepare for the role, because as I write, I'm kind of memorizing. Yeah, and typically I like to work with make headdresses, and architecture is something that I look at sometimes. Putting these round-up pieces together. And sculpting, like with cardboard, is very similar to sewing for me. So
I keep thinking you want to ask a question. Just working out. I'm going to open it up after this last question. So I'm going to open it up right after this question. So this is for both of you. How can the residents of the Bronx take the themes of your performances, reclaiming history, ancestral memory, and collective participation, and use them to cultivate everyday joy and solidarity within their own neighborhoods?
Maybe something I can name first and then continue to answer that question too is, so the title of this event is Black August to the political potential of performance. I think that's more or less correct. And just thinking about Black August and thinking about the Soledad brothers. And so in August 1970, Jonathan Jackson was assassinated at Marin County Courthouse. And the following year, in August 1971, his older brother, George L. Jackson, was assassinated in San Quentin. And so Black August, as we now know of it and celebrate it today, I think had its first celebrations maybe back in 1979, also within the boundaries of San Quentin. And so much of the month of being a month of remembrance is really related to abolition and the abolitionist movement specifically that was happening in California in the 70s, and a movement for the freedom of political prisoners. And so thinking about that legacy and that history, and how to translate or convey elements of really atrocious, violent, unspeakable histories in the way that Jodie and I are doing. It's, I think, a question of like how do we bring in these narratives into the public domain, particularly at a time when the government is seeking to erase any connections to those histories, and particularly any investment in abolition. And so I think moments like this of public performance, of free performance, of opportunities to speak to these truths and into these histories are really important.
like so interesting. For me, I'm connecting to Black August, but thinking I'm Jamaican first and foremost. So, and I grew up there, so I'm thinking about my own history with this. And August, August 8th was Jamaica Independence Day. So I'm thinking, is it August 6th? I'm blanking out at this point. So for me, and hearing that there's some other Caribbean nations that they gained independence from Great Britain in August, I think it weaves in very well to this topic of Black August, and thinking about freedom and independence in that way.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience if anybody has any. I guess we could, since we only have this one, you have to come up. No. We have another mic.
We have
Another one. We got one. Oh, okay. Look at us. Fancy. Okay.
On that topic of performance, I'm interested for both of you if when you're devising a work, you're also thinking about the season that it lands in, especially when it's sort of referring to histories and whether, if you're evoking like a history of, plantations and things, that the story that you're telling it in the month that it happens, so that the audience also can feel those temperatures and those sounds and smells of the trees and those sorts of things. So I'm curious, just generally in your work, has kind of like that, if you're telling the story of the history, does the timing matter for you?
I can go first. The timing this season was incredibly important for After Air, especially because I first shared it publicly on June 18th as part of a Juneteenth festival that was organized by a wonderful theater based in Manhattan called Lovely. And the time of the performance, I think we started the performance at 7:30 because sunset was around 8:30 earlier in the summer. And so I wanted the end of the performance, the sort of hour-long durational participatory work, to happen when tide was rising at that point. And so at the end of the performance, we felt the crashing of the waves, we felt the salt, we felt the spray, and we could hear both the chiming of the copper, but we felt the ocean. And I thought that was really important for the work and for, and recognizing Juneteenth as well.
Well, with the earlier monologue, I started with talking about like Sarah Williams's experience that was recorded, in history, that someone wrote about her testimony. Someone wrote her word by word testimony, and how her mother passed away in August. It couldn't be a better time than now to perform this work. Now's a talk, kind of piggybacking on your last question about August, Black August. So, I think, and the first time I performed Living Her Streets of Sugar at Wave Hill, it also took place around Jamaica Independence Day, the same time in August. So, I would do this every August, just to, expand on this.
Okay, just great.
First of all, thank you both for your work, and to the later that goes into performance. I thought the contrast of your styles was quite generative. Like, I thought once Jodie's performance began, Asia's performance read almost as like an aberration or a vision. And then I think in contrast to Asia's work, the like literal reenactment element of Jodie's work became more prominent. So I think I'm curious first if like there was a conversation between the two performances intentionally, or if this is just spirit working out. I also would love if you could talk about how you each arrive at your form and your style, and how what you intend for audiences to get out of the performance, like how that shapes how you choose to present. Because I think it's interesting that y'all have like very similar foundations. Like there's a commonality in what you're attempting to activate, but it happens so differently. So
Thank you so much for your questions. Maybe to begin, so Jodie and I've had the pleasure of knowing Jodie for maybe five years now, maybe longer. Maybe 6 years. And I think we've been in conversation for a very long time. We've been, I think, programmed to perform at festivals and at events together before too. And we've seen a lot of each other's work. We've attended a lot of each other's performances. And so speaking for myself, have a lot of trust. And I know that Jodie makes her work with such care. And I always look forward to, sharing space with you like this. When we first started planning what this evening would look like, I knew that Jodie was going to do 2 different performances, and so we decided to interrupt to have the sort of natural space between them with my work. And I think when I'm first devising a performance, what's most important to me is probably like is image, and I'm usually like pulled or called to an image, and then the question is, how do I activate that image? How do I invite people into the work? And for this piece, it was really sound that I just kept returning to. Something else I didn't say earlier, but with copper and with wind chimes, in the South, there are a few states that have their own derogatory term, but there's a term called like the Alabama wind chime, which was used to refer to victims of racial terror and people who were lynched. And so, but for myself, I think of wind chimes and I think of my grandmother, and I think of spring and summertime with her, of like making wind chimes and hanging them in our tree in our backyard. And so I'm like, how do you hold these conflicting resonances and ideas, and how can the sound that these make when they clang, what does that bring up for people? What is it how does it rupture space too? And something else that wasn't initially my intention with this work, but when people saw this piece of the seaport, they were saying that the copper pipes made them think of people walking in chains, which wasn't initially something that was on my mind, but it was something that happened when the work was performed in space. And yeah, I think it's a constant dance of like thinking about my own physical experience through the performance and thinking about what I want it to sort of rustle up in other people or in space.
Yeah, when Asia and I were in conversation about this whole event, I had no idea what she was going to be doing. I but I felt like, why not just do this Living Histories piece again, because it's the video that's playing in the museum, where I'm dressed in this very same costume as per Yusuf. And I'm thinking about my process with this, it was very collaborative, as I stated earlier. I was working with a team of other performers from different places, and I think if this project was not presented to me by that team at University of Edinburgh, I wouldn't be sitting here and doing this work. They reached out to me though because of a previous project that I did called Junkanuakum, and some of you here in the audience may know about that project, where I wear this white house on my head and some of the performers are white faced, and it's basically the Afro-Jamaican masquerade. It's been around since 17th, 18th century. And so this role for me is very different. It's much more theatrical. I almost didn't do the project because I was like, I'm not a trained actress like that. I'm not an actress. I can perform, but I'm not an actress. And I just kept stressing that. They're like, no, we think you'd be perfect for this. And they really wanted to work with me because of the specificity of it, because the enslaved women were from Western Jamaica, and that's where I'm from, and that's where my grandmothers are from, and so it hit very close to home. And so I was thinking very much about embodiment, thinking about wow, this really could have been people in my own family, and I thought okay, after reading the script and developing the piece together, I was like, yeah, I think I'm good for this. So it took a lot out of me too in that process to embody Sarah Williams in particular. Her scene was the most painful. Thinking about her mother's burial. Her mother never had an actual burial, and I was thinking the performance could be a way to kind of have a burial for her, putting that white sheet there, and it's kind of laid on the ground, almost like a grave. And so I'm thinking about, how can I memorialize this woman, her mother. And I hope that kind of answers your question. But I also start with sketches. Drawing is a big part of my process, and I drew some of these ideas out and how I was going to design the costume. I was even looking at 18th century, what did enslaved women in the Caribbean wear? They wore all white or off-white, made of muslin. This is made of muslin. white head wraps. They were not allowed to expose their hair, in Jamaica in particular. So I look a lot at history and kind of mimic that to the best way possible. And I was looking at the dress, the dress forms, and I had to kind of take the patterns from those dresses.
Sorry, it was a meditation, but I didn't want to do my brain journal.
I just Jodie think about her piece at Police Exhibition Space and the intergenerational aspect of it. There's also like an intergenerational aspect of your collaborating there. But also relating to, you said queer, furtive, black female performers. There's also like a generational aspect of that and the different practices. And I was also thinking about lineage as I was reading this Candy and Minimum from Felix Gonzalez Torres, and giving the candy out on kind of a memorial for the candy with popular brass and other these skills. But I wanted to ask what you think of your lineage of performance is, in terms of like which performers you look into as a lineage, and the intergenerational aspect, both working together and in group practice specifically with the kids at Poets Exhibition Space and with other projects.
Oh, good question. Think about intergenerational. I think my lineage. When I first got into performance, I had just gotten my BFA pretty much, and then I looked at right before I was graduating. I was looking through the library, and I came across a book with Marina Abramovic, and Yo-Yo Kusama. I learned about the Guerrilla Girls a little bit, and I was like, wait, I need to be doing this, not painting. So my lineage. I don't know. Well, I was trying to make kind of soft sculptures, looking at Yo-Yo Kusama a lot, actually. And I was kind of experimenting with that for a while, making these soft sculptures. And then I was like thinking, I think more recently, I feel like I identify more with Lorraine O'Grady. So I would like to say maybe I am, I could be in that lineage, but also looking at, maybe I'm like thinking about who else. Renee Cox, I like her work a lot too. And how she inserts herself in these scenes, with photography. For now, maybe those two. I could get a little bit into also and I think the Cuban artist and Ana Mendieta a little bit. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question. Oh yeah, and the intergenerational aspect. Shout out to Fitzmore. I worked previously with Fitzmore on another project, and I just felt like, why does this have to be an older man that could be the magistrate? I just wanted someone who can project well, and it could be someone who would likely not necessarily be the magistrate, because the magistrate in Jamaica is like an official, maybe court person, and at that time it was likely a white man, But I felt like, why not? Why does it have to stick to script,
Really quickly, two people that I wanted to name, one of which Jodie already named, Lorraine O'Grady, and I also wanted to name Pobel, are definitely two inspirations for me, particularly in the way that they both disrupted public space, activated everyday space, and made really anything into a performance, and the way that they were able to invite people into their work and make collaborative events and happenings across New York.
Any other questions?
Watching both performances, I often think about them. So with Jodie's work, Evening Kindred a lot by Octavia Butler, and that kind of idea of moving through time and understanding that perspective in slavery, and that kind of contradiction of having to acknowledge and preserve that to exist, which is what makes that book incredible and also and very disturbing. And so I was feeling some of that while watching that performance. And then with your piece, I was thinking about Drexia. You know Drexia? Okay, so Drexia is, I forget the name of the author, but it's like the science fiction story about people who were enslaved, thrown overboard, their family. And River Solomon, authors of Butler, wrote, and then, I got it. Who's a young author, Saruman, about those people actually, directly the idea was they lived underwater now. The mothers gave birth to the babies in the water and they could live. And so some of that kind of like sadness and possibility at the same time exists in both of your eyes here to me, which I find, like it's depressing material, but there's hope, You want to speak about that with me? I'm sorry, I just talked.
Thank you for those references. Actually, another literary inspiration for this performance was a lot of the poetry by Alexis Pauline Gumbs and the way that she's thinking about how do we straddle the future, and how do we bring our ancestors into the future, and how are they already present with us now, and like how do we resuscitate those ghosts, those spirits? And yeah, so I think that was in making this character, this figure, I wanted to be or make something that was mythical, of a being that could exist and survive underwater, having this sort of ethereal temporary visit with us here on land. So yeah, thank you for the reference. Someone actually brought up River Solomon back in June, and I know I definitely need to read their work.
It's so funny you mentioned Octavia Butler Kindred because I haven't read it, and I'm ashamed to say I haven't read it yet. But literally, as I was on my way to come here with my props, I decided to take the bus because I had to go pick up the candies and all of that. And I'm running errands before coming here, and I'm at the bus stop, and it looks like someone threw a whole bunch of books out, but the ground was so filthy, I almost picked up the book. The book was right there by itself looking at me. So that's a sign I need to read the book. And I was like, oh my God, should I pick up the book? But it's just so much germs on the floor, dog poop is everywhere. So I'm like, yeah, but that's a sign. But I wanted to like this. I was reading for the context of the work that's in the exhibition. And it's that book combined with this work from Living Histories that helped me to make the work that I'm making now. So the ceramic weapons that's on the wall that's surrounding the video of me dressed as this Mary Williamson figure. Vincent Brown, Tacky's Revolt, thinking about slave revolts and like looking back at that and how the Maroons fought the British and all of that and overcoming that. That is definitely a text that I'm studying. And so, yeah, I hope to read some more books about this kindred, and I just finished I finished reading the 1619 Project and thinking about that a lot. Yeah, and how they want to there is even like rebuttals that on opposite sides thinking about like basically saying that is not true. So this makes what we're doing more important.
Okay, I want to thank Asia and Jodie again for hooking us up with performances today. And thank you for sticking with us till the end. And check out the Bronx Museum's website. There's stuff going on there all the time. And thank you.